Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Braude and Margery Eagan. We are continuing our second round of interviews with the gubernatorial candidates leading up to the June nominating convention in Worcester for the Democrats. Here with us in Studio 3 is Democrat Joe Avellone. Joe is a surgeon. Currently, he's corporate senior vice president at Par Excel International. Joe, it's good to see you again.
Thank you, Margery and Jim. Pleased to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for coming in, too, Joe. So let's start assuming that you win, that you you win the Democratic nomination, you go on to beat whoever the Republican is, probably Charlie Baker.
I am assuming that.
Yeah, and there's an independent, too. Let's not
Several.
Forget him. That's right. Well, do you want to go down the list, Jim?
There are 3 independents.
Okay.
But go ahead.
Would you like to list them?
No.
Okay. All right. Okay. Let's assume you win.
Yeah.
What's the most important thing you think you would, with the top of your priority, that you would like to assume as the successor to Governor Deval Patrick?
Well, the biggest thing we have to do as a Commonwealth is create tens of thousands of jobs. So that doesn't happen overnight. But all through our gateway cities, there's still 10% plus unemployment. And, I've been in 155 cities and towns, and all of them many, many times. They're not recovering on their own. So the next governor's got to focus on this, or the divide gets too great. It's got to be based on new kinds of businesses and industries, which means new job skills. And the second thing, it's really hand in hand with it, so I can't really tease them apart, is to close the achievement gap in the poorer performing schools. Every year there's another cohort of kids on a bridge to nowhere in the poorer performing schools.
You know, I read a depressing story about my own hometown, Fall River, the other day that talked about only 14% of the people in Fall River have college degrees. Many people have no high school degrees. So
35% don't have a high school degree.
35%
in Fall River. Yeah.
That's pretty bad. So what can you do? I mean, that's a real huge
It's a huge issue that is holding the city back, absolutely. And there's a history there because there was a textile town, mill town, and people grew up and generation after generation didn't really believe they needed to finish high school. They went into the mills. Of course, that's all gone, and that's never coming back. And the modern industries, you at least have to have an adequate high school education. So, I think you have to start with the building blocks of things work, and they have at-risk and poor performing schools in Fall River. I've been there many times. And you do have to fund in those schools. It's my highest priority with a special fund I'm going to create pre-K to make a higher percentage more literate at the 3rd grade and lengthening the school day and remaking it with academic support and enrichment. So you have to do the things we know work, but we have to do it. And it's beyond individual school districts. I think the state has to really focus on this. And Fall River isn't alone, of course, but it's a great example of where it's hard to bring new skills, new jobs if you don't have an adequate high school base there, and they definitely need that.
I think I said it backwards. Did I say only 14%?
14% don't have a higher education. Only 14% have a higher education.
Yeah,
That's
I said it
correct.
backwards. Excuse me.
Joe Avellone, there's some people who think that the solution to problems of unemployment in major cities in Massachusetts is to plop a casino down in them. The people of Springfield obviously feel that way. People in Revere feel that way. People in Everett feel that way. A lot of other places don't. Are casinos part of the answer for the jobs that don't exist?
Not really. I mean, they're good construction jobs for those that might get built. But basically, for the long run, you need, for sustainable jobs, you need these new industries. That's what's going to create the good paying jobs that is going to bring more people into the middle class and continue to grow and support our middle class, which is what's sorely needed here.
Does that mean you don't support casinos? Or where are you in this thing? Assuming the Supreme Judicial Court says that the voters can decide whether we should have a casino law come November, how do you vote and why?
Well, I don't favor casinos overall. I think it was oversold. The revenue was oversold. It's also going to be a bricks and mortar dinosaur as everything moves to online over 10 years, and the costs were undersold. So there's some good upfront jobs. But I like the law. We do have a law that does allow for local control. Each community can decide. Communities are deciding. And so I would go out with the law. I don't like the referendum because I don't like referendum government, period. I think
you don't like the people having a say in whether or not the casino law should exist?
People had a say. They elected a legislature. The legislature worked through a complicated problem, came up with this law. Generally...
But how can you say, with all due respect, the House of Representatives voted overwhelmingly against casinos when their boss was Sal DeMacy, who was against casinos. Yeah. 64 of the very same reps who had voted no 2 years later had an epiphany and voted yes. Why? Because the new speaker favored casinos, Bob DeLeo. That's not the best of democracy. That's not representing your constituents, is it? It's essentially being responsible to your boss, the speaker.
Well, if you look at it at a higher level, I think we do have a legislature. It does pass laws. That's what we should stick with. I don't say that there shouldn't be a referendum. I just say, personally, I wouldn't support it because I don't think we should be overturning recently passed laws generally. I think that sets up a terrible planning climate for all kinds of businesses, puts a chill on business here. And ultimately, we've got to create a lot of jobs, so it's got to be a good business climate here.
There's also going to be, if assuming they get the signatures, a ballot question on the gas tax.
Yeah.
Where are you on the ballot question for the gas tax?
Well, I favor the gas tax. We definitely need a dedicated fund for infrastructure, but I don't favor indexing. I think indexing is a backdoor tax. People resent it. Ultimately, it'll get overturned. I think leadership is going back when you need more, and we are going to need more. There's going to be future, probably gas tax increases, maybe tolling. Electronic tolling increases to fund our needed infrastructure. We have a huge backlog because of the big dig, largely. But I don't think we should have an automatic escalator. I think people really resent that, and I don't blame them. I think real leadership for the governor and the legislature is to stand up and make the case. They should do that, and I would do that as governor as needed.
We're talking to Joe Avellone, who's one of the 5 Democrats who is hoping to get on the ballot in mid-June for the September primary. I've read a few places, Joe, that you describe yourself as a fiscal moderate.
Yeah.
What does that mean in English? I mean, you just told us you're against indexing of the gas tax. We should be clear, the ballot question wouldn't repeal the gas tax. It would repeal the indexing portion that I believe you're the only Democrat who would vote yes on that particular question, at least as far as I understand.
Yes.
But you said there will need to be some toll or tax increases, at which point you go to the people, go to their legislators. What makes you a fiscal moderate? You're not taking a no-tax pledge. What makes you a fiscal moderate?
Well, I'm not advocating a broad-based income tax increase, which all my other opponents are, for one way or another, because I know there's this huge opportunity to control our healthcare costs that creates hundreds of millions of dollars in the budget that that's where we should spend our effort and time. I know that at $36 billion. If we even lowered the percentage of revenue, which is now at 40% of the state budget that goes to health care, if it was 39%, that's $350 million. And it's well within our range. We know there's $29 billion in wasted care that doesn't add to health outcomes by our own Health Policy Commission. Just a fraction of that, which is I know we can do, can save hundreds of millions of dollars in the budget. I'm the only candidate that's actually controlled healthcare costs and lowered them in this state. I was the CO of Blue Cross in the 90s. We did control healthcare costs during that decade. And I know that our system is so fragmented, redundant, and inefficient that there's enormous potential. The other candidates don't seem to have a grasp of that. They don't really know the potential because I don't think they've sat in the seat I've sat in. And I know, so therefore they're advocating tax increases. We don't need a tax increase. We need to control our healthcare costs. And if I could just add, it's the biggest budget busters in cities and towns. It's the biggest inhibitor of small businesses. So controlling our healthcare costs creates a lot of opportunity all across the board in Massachusetts.
Do you think Charlie Baker around Harvard Pilgrim knows anything about healthcare?
He does, but on his watch, he increased premiums about 10% a year plus, compounding over about a decade. So that wasn't exactly controlling healthcare costs.
Joe, you have a convention in Worcester mid-June. And the conventional wisdom goes as follows. Since Margery's the cup half full, asking you what you'll do as governor, I'll be the cup half empty. The conventional wisdom is that Grossman, the treasurer, and Coakley, the attorney general, get their, quote, 15%, that you need 15% of delegates have to vote to put you on the primary ballot, that Kayem and Juliet Kayem and Don Berwick have a shot. You are the least likely of the 5. Why is conventional wisdom wrong as to you?
Well, conventional wisdom seems to be in a bubble with just a few people talking to each other. I've been...
like me and Margery, for example.
That's
That's
right.
exactly what you're talking about.
Maybe you need to get out. You can get out a few other times. I've got endorsements from 22 mayors and city councilors, the second most endorsements of anybody beyond Steve, I think. And I'm proud because it's mayors and city councilors, mostly in the gateway cities. So it's Worcester, mayor and 4 city councilors. It's 3 city councilors in Quincy. It's the mayor of Taunton, city councilors in Fall River, some city councilors in Boston, so on and on. And why that's important is those are the cities. That's where Democrats win elections. They're a little more moderate and conservative as Democrats, but it's the center of the Democratic Party. And there's a lot more uncommitted delegates still in those areas. So I know I'm on the ballot. I know I'm getting on the ballot.
You're upset about the 15% rule. And for those who don't know, correct me if I'm wrong because I'm not even sure I'm right. The 15% rule, it says, again, you have to get 15% of the delegates to vote for you to make it on the primary ballot. My understanding is what upsets you. Why don't you say what upsets you rather than me trying to characterize your position?
Well, I think the rule that we are living with now, the one ballot rule.
You have to get it on the first ballot.
You have to get it on one ballot. Came into effect in 2006, and so in 2006 there were three contenders: Duvall, Tom Riley, and Chris Gabrielli. They all got on. It wasn't a contested convention. 4 years later, Duvall was running unopposed. So this is the first time now that we're faced with the one ballot with now five pretty legitimate contenders. So if the Democrats end up cleaving off some of those and not allowing the full Democratic Party to vet what are pretty five reasonable characters, I think we're making a mistake. I think we're not only making a mistake because that doesn't seem fair to the larger Democratic Party, and I don't think it's going to look like we're the inclusive party. I also don't think that I think I'm the only moderate in the race, frankly, and we're going to leave a big part of the Democratic Party behind. I think all my other opponents are moving to the left continuously and trying to appease a small part of the party which goes to this convention, which are mostly progressives. And I think that leaves a big part of our party kind of without a candidate, even in the primary, if I don't get on. Luckily, I'm getting on, but I think why take that risk? Why did we set ourselves up this
Would you
way?
be happier if there was no nominating, there was no 15% threshold, that if you essentially get, 10,000 signatures, that you're on the ballot? Is that...
No, I respect the idea that we have a convention. I think that's good. It's good for the party. And I even respect the idea that we want, people that have been vetted pretty heavily. So I could see two possible options. One is go back to the two ballots. Basically, when we had two ballots, and that could have happened this time, most credible candidates find their way on the second ballot, by the second ballot. When there's one and five candidates, that's what sets up the math problem. I think another thing would be lower the threshold to 10%, but I'd favor the two ballots. The reason the party wanted to move away from that is they thought the 2002 convention was messy and it took a long time. Hey, it's a small price to pay to get it right, to offer good candidates to the larger electorate.
We're talking to Joe Avellone, who's running for governor on the Democratic side. You just mentioned that you are more moderate than the other Democrats that are running, that they're further to the left than you are. And you mentioned the income tax, that they want an income tax. What else? What else distinguishes you from the other four?
Well, for example, on health care, I know we can control health care costs. We have a great system with universal coverage. We put it in place 7 years ago. It's a success story. We got 98% people covered. What we should be focusing on now is controlling health care costs, making this delivery system more efficient. That was always meant to be step two. We should carry on with that. All of my competitors are talking about single payer. Let's move to single payer. That's a political, ideological battle that opens up a whole can of worms that'll take our eye off the ball for the next 5 years, literally, while we're sorting that out, versus getting on with controlling our health care costs.
Who's talking about single payer besides Don Berwick? Don Berwick is an unabashed single payer guy, former head of Center of Medicaid, Medicare, Medicaid, whichever it is. Who else is embracing single payer amongst the other three?
Everyone else, I'm in forums with them all the time. Everyone else has said we ought to look at it, we ought to be thinking about it, we ought to study it. Steve wants to convene a meeting. I guess he wants to be the chief convener. But they're all talking about it. I think it's wasted energy, and we should really get on to controlling healthcare costs.
Is there anything else that distinguishes you from the other four?
Well, those are two pretty big things.
Yeah,
I'm liberal on the social issues, so this is really around fiscal moderation.
Okay.
So Deval Patrick, in the minds of most, has had a fairly tough year in his final year, from the DCF issues, Department of Children and Families, to the rollout of medical marijuana, to the chaos in the Casino Commission, on and on. How would you rate Deval Patrick's 7+ years in office in Massachusetts?
Well, first of all, the context, he's in the 7th year of an 8-year time, and of course that's always hard on anybody. And second of all, we had a terrible recession and a really slow and uneven recovery. So that was the playing field he was on. I think he had a very exciting and correct vision for the Commonwealth when he started out, and I think that's still the correct vision. I think the next governor needs to take on the big implementation steps of this. He talked about new jobs and new industries. He talked about improving education, and that means education. He talked about controlling healthcare costs. That was Chapter 224. You need now somebody who's managed large organizations, in my view, that can take on the next big steps of that vision. We don't need a new vision. We need to continue on with.
But how would you how would you characterize him as a manager, particularly in year 7 on these issues that the public has become pretty consumed with?
Disappointed, but it's not just him. We haven't had a manager that's run large organizations in the governor's office for a long time. So there's not a management culture there. And I actually can't wait for that part of the job. I mean, this is what I do. I know that we can instill a better management culture there, so there's more accountability, more metrics, more focus on just the key things we need to get done. instead of allowing just a bureaucracy to roll forward. So if you add the lack of a management culture with the terrible recession, you start seeing some of the failures that we've now seen.
Okay, you have 30 seconds. All I want to know is, and you can't say it's
actually.
meeting the voters. What's been the highlight of your race, and what's been the torturous thing when you go home at night, you say, I can't believe I got to do this again? What's the good and the bad? Tell the truth.
The good is the amazing diversity of our state, which is so small. For a small state, it's just incredibly diverse. The regions are diverse. Of course, the ethnicity is diverse. What people care about is diverse. You would expect it to be a much larger state with that amount of diversity. That's fascinating.
Okay, now raise your right hand for the bad part. I want to make sure you're telling the truth. He has raised his right hand. What's the part that's driving you crazy?
Well, anybody that saes they like fundraising has got to have a history.
Okay, that's an honest
I definitely
answer.
don't like fundraising. But
Joe,
it's part of the job for sure.
What's your website, Joe?
It's AvaloneForGovernor.com. Thank you for asking.
Great to see you, Joe.
Joe,
Good
thank you
luck
so
on
much for coming
June.
in. Thank
you. My pleasure.
Joe Avellone is running for governor on the Democratic ticket. And again, thank you so much for being here.